I didn't get a new mic holder, but what I did was I got grip tape. It just works. I got grip tape, which is like very grippy tape, and I put the very grippy tape around the base of the mic holder, and then that allowed it to finally stop punching me in the face. It still moves very slowly. Like if you go watch one of my videos and you can like speed it up, you'll see it kind of like slowly come back and almost hit me in the face. So, hey, Prasad. I think I said hi to everybody else. Hi, everybody. Okay, so what we are working on today, let's switch over to our actual sharing and make sure it looks correct. Does it look correct? It looks correct. All right, great. Oh, there you go. All right, so what are we working on today? We are working on reviewing and continuing my work on rebuilding Lambo. And the reason we're doing this is because, first of all, I was getting a little tired of working on on-ramp, but second of all, I actually put out a question for everybody. Let's see, where was it? I wanted to actually pull up the stream, or pull up the tweet, I mean, so that you all can see it. Happy New Year. 23 hours left. I said only make it for... I'm so frustrated. This was supposed to run for an hour and a half, and I must have made it run for a day and an hour and a half. So anyway, in the end, everybody picked that they wanted to... Hold on. Here we go. I can do this. I said, does everybody want more on-ramp, or do they want to work on rebuilding Lambo and PHP, or do they just want to see votes? Well, nobody else tweeted an idea. Even those 4.1% of people voted that they wanted to tweet me an idea, none of them actually tweeted me the idea. So instead, it looks like the large percentage of the people who are interested in choosing what we're going to do is they wanted to work on rebuilding Lambo and PHP. Yeah, Joe. Hey, Susanna. Hi, Joe. Shame on you. So here's what Lambo is. Lambo is a tool. Thanks for following Juarez dos Pampas. Lambo is a tool that is currently written in Bash or shell scripts or however you want to call it, that I wrote a couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago or something like that, that allows you to very quickly spin up new Laravel applications. You can actually see in this little GIF here, you basically type Laravel, you type Lambo, then the project name, and it does a whole bunch of stuff that I do at the beginning of all of my projects. It does Laravel new, it can get initializes, it'll open it up in your browser, it'll open it up in your editor, all this kind of stuff. And over time, Regis Zanandrea here. Well, hi, Regis Zanandrea. Over time, we added more and more things that it can do. You can customize the commit message. You can customize the path that it's creating these under. You can decide to make it quiet. You can use a dev branch instead of the master branch. You can scaffold authentication. You can have it run NPM or whatever else. Customize which browser you want to open in. And you can pass these as flags, but what's more likely is the people who are using these flags, unless they every once in a while customize it, they're going to create an after file and a config file. So the config file allows you to define all of these. Do I always want Bootstrap? Do I always want the auth? Do I never want the auth? And every time Lambo runs, with whether or not you pass any flags, it goes and reads this config file so that you can just have one global config file. And then the after file is basically like a bash script. And so that can run, and after it runs its stuff, then it'll run all these other bash commands. And so these other bash commands will allow you to do things like pull in your favorite composer packages or something like that. And so there's some commands that allow you to make the after file, edit the after file, make the config file, edit the config file. So it is primarily targeting Mac, although you can use it on Linux as well. And then it uses the Laravel installer and assumes that you're going to be working on Valet. So what happened was a year or two ago, somebody started a branch rewriting it in Laravel Zero, which is which is a tool right here. IJ Patricio started working on this thing to port it over to Laravel Zero, and then Andrew Morgan, who works at Titan, picked up that work for a little bit. But what happened was it just kind of got a little bit, it got big. And it got kind of complicated, and I was having trouble following it. So what I ended up doing after it kind of sat for a while is I just deleted that whole branch and started from scratch. And so you can see the branch that I'm working on right now, if you look at its history, is going to have me basically starting from scratch. Let's see when I started, probably in November. So initialize Laravel Zero. So I basically, if you're not familiar with Laravel Zero, it's basically just a tweaked version of Laravel that has some tooling that's primarily focused around making it useful for building command line applications, built by our friend Nuno Maduro, who is on this call right now. Hey, Vince. I love this template because this is the Jigsaw template. Nice work. So basically, if you want to build command line applications using something very, 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 very similar to Laravel, use Laravel Zero, because it's really just Laravel with some customizations to it. So I initialized Laravel Zero, and then I started building out commands. So the interesting thing is, and one thing I really want to note is that the original work that was done inspired how I worked it. So I'm going to show you all the structure of it really quickly, and then we can talk about what we're going to be working on. So the basic structure for us right now is there's a command called new. And this is where almost everything's going to live, because just like with the shell version of this, we're going to basically say Lambo new and then my project. So what we're going to do here is, let's see, so our constructor, so just like any Laravel command, you define what your signature is by saying something like, so your signature could be something like, make app or something like that. So that defines, like if you do this, then you would run this by saying Lambo make app. But I have the signature empty because what I'm doing is actually building a signature based on a whole bunch of classes that represent all of these different options that you can pass. So remember, there's all these options here, message or path or quiet or dev. So I basically made classes to represent each of those options. Oh, no, I didn't end up making classes. I instead represented them. I've had classes and then delete them. So I represented them by this options class, which basically has all the information you need to know about each of those options. What's its short flag? What's its long flag? How do we describe whether or not it takes parameters? And then how do we describe kind of what it does as we're defining it in the CLI? So what we do here is basically run through all of those, and we build basically this signature, so again, it's the Laravel style signature, which right here is basically going to generate something like Lambo new, project name. So what it's doing is it's building that signature. So that's our basic signature. And then for each of these options in our options file, it's then building its structure as well. And so, for example, this one, editor, blah, 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 is really just basically something like this, where you say, we basically have like a flag. I think it's editor, and whether or not it takes a parameter. And so if it has this param description, that means it takes a parameter. So you're basically just building a classic Laravel command. And you can actually see what that looks like if you were to just run this and just basically die and dump on this signature. So let's just do this real quick so I can show you all what that looks like. Thanks for subscribing, Ellie. So we just do Lambo new ABC. Whoops, failed to open stream. Oh, I must have been doing almost all the work on this on my laptop, so this machine is a little out of date. Okay, cool. So this is what it's building. It's using that options class to basically build this massive syntax signature of what all the different options are. And so these options right here really just represent the same thing that we have in our existing one, except our existing one is a shell script. Happy New Year, Dustin. So our existing one, oh, nope, we're in the wrong branch. Let me show you the existing one in master. So the existing app looks like this. And it's very shelly, and it's often very hard for people to contribute to because they, and I as well, don't write shell scripts all day, every day. And so some of the more complicated logic that you need to do can be really tough to fit in. It's all just kind of one big flat file, and it's hard or impossible to test. This is Lambo. This entire 509 long shell script is Lambo. And so the idea of moving to PHP is great. We can separate it out. We can use object-oriented programming, and we can also test it as well. Integrate this tool with Laravel Shift Blueprint. That would be awesome. I don't even remember which one Blueprint is. I love JSON, but I don't remember the names of all the tools. So things we did is review current structure. All right, so this basically builds out the syntax that we're passing to Laravel to say, okay, here's what they can do. But now that we can do that, we need to do things with them. And so these things right here, build signature and build signature option, basically take this options class and then create our signature from it. Then we have to handle it. So the first thing we got to do is figure out basically what are the globally configured options. Thanks for following, Zawdad. Globally configured options that we're going to need in all of our commands. And the commands are things like open browser or whatever. So we're going to need to have access to this console object so we can pull these properties from it, or the parameters from it, I mean. We're going to need to know what our TLD is, and the TLD is whether this person's using Valet under .test or .dev or .whatever else. And then here's a few other things that we're going to want. We're going to want to know the project name in a lot of different places. We're going to want to know the base path that I'm running this from, the project path, which is basically the base path plus the project folder, and then the URL. And those probably going to be other things that we need globally. And these are all things basically we will need in multiple places across multiple different pieces of Lambo. Building Symfony console apps is mega fun. Yeah, I mean, so Laravel is a layer. Laravel's console stuff is a layer on top of Symfony console, and then Laravel Zero is a layer on top of that. And this right here is me typoing installer in a commit, which bums me out. All right, so how does get TLD work? It basically finds our home directory, and then it looks for the Laravel Valet configuration files, and then pulls the TLD out of it. TLD used to be named domain. How do we figure out the base path? Well, we basically, figure out the home directory, and then unfortunately you don't get resolution of the tilde, which represents your home path, and so we have to figure that out. And if they have not customized it, then we just get CWD, get the current working directory, which is a PHP thing. So then, once we have all of our configuration options set, we say, oh, if we didn't pass in a project name, so that basically means if somebody ran Lambo new, then, oh gosh, there's hey, Beganovich, Mr. Matt Stauffer. Hey, Lee, I had a great holiday and New Year, thank you. So one thing we're running into here, an option with shortcut N already exists, is that one of our short codes is N for running npm install. And unfortunately, that is something that's already taken. And so what I've been doing is every time I work on it, I just comment this one out until I figure it out. What I'm likely to do is just get rid of the short code on this one, but I don't know if I've built code that allows you to do that. So if we do this now we won't get that error. And so what this does is it runs our help screen. And I basically built a command called display help screen that just builds the exact same help screen we had in our old app, but builds it with PHP. The only difference is because Laravel Zero makes this super easy, we're also displaying our version number, which wasn't super easy to do in the shell script. Hey, Seropian, Happy New Year to you too. So, all right, so we have this help screen, and this help screen also is, so by default, if you don't pass something in, you can configure in a service provider somewhere, I forget what it's called, what your default command is. So if you just hit Lambo without passing something to it, it gets passed. And so I customized it that if I hit that, it'll also run that same help screen. N is taken by Artisan. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly which. Am I realizing what today? The N thing or something else? So yeah, I can't actually remember what N was taken by, to be honest. Again, I hadn't really kind of dug too far into that. So Jaserovic or Jaserovic, Jaserovic is my guess. Emin. So yeah. I thought about getting rid of the shortcodes entirely. And the thing is, I don't think that a lot of people are using the command line flags. So I'm kind of leaning towards not worrying about them and really worrying about the config files, because I think that's where the majority of the work is happening. I don't think a lot of people are like running Laravel -this, -that. I think it's the occasional thing where someone says, oh, I need to customize this just this one time. And the majority of people who use it have a config file and they don't worry about these flags at all. That's my guess. I'm not releasing Lambo new version today because it's not going to be done by the end of this stream. It's not 45 minutes left of work on it. I'll release it when it's done. So once we check whether they've passed the project name, and if they haven't passed the project name, we display the help screen. Then we move on to the actual process of creating a Laravel app, so this is where we actually get it. Do you implement your PHP docs always after you finish your code? I only use PHP docs if they are useful. You can see here that there's none here. Do you know why? Because it's the handle method. What does it do? It handles things. So to me, documentation has a lot of cost. Like inline documentation has a lot of cost. It gets out of sync very easily. And this is different in other languages depending on how they handle the documentation. But the number of times I've seen docs that get out of sync, and the number of times the majority of programmers run into docs that get out of sync, it basically tells our brain, don't read it anymore. I think documentation inline docs are very, very useful for open source, like templated things like Laravel. And I think they're very unuseful in actual project code unless you have a specific need to target newcomers, which I kind of think about with my app. So I always kind of like, I put more doc blocks for my public apps than I do for my private apps. But in general, I just say, if the syntax, if it's important, if somebody can't look at this and a newcomer can't look at this and easily understand what it's doing, then I'll put a doc block. So fair play, thought it was just a few tweaks, no worries. Yeah, no, this is a complete rewrite from the ground up, but I've been working on this rewrite for quite a while. All right, so here are the steps that we take in order to make Lambo work. We verify that the path that we're trying to create an app is, that the project in is actually available. We verify that you have all the dependencies available. We run Laravel new. We open it in your editor. We customize your .env and .env.example files according to the name of your project and what the Mac defaults are and stuff like that. We run phprs in key generate. We initialize your Git repo with the custom message if you passed it. We install your npm dependencies, running npm install. We run Valet Secure if you opted for it, and we open it in the browser. John says I'm using all the new PHP type things, not because I'm in the type everything camp, because I hate doc blocks. Yeah. So the idea of making each of these be an action class was something that I inherited, and I really enjoy working with from the previous incarnation of it. So just to give you a quick example what they look like, customize.env, each of them has this base, they're invocable. So that's why you see we basically get an instance out of the application container, and then we just run it right away. So we new up a class and run it, and that's you do that using this invoke method. And so each of these actions basically just has an invoke method that does the thing. So the thing here is, I'm hearing the noise of people following, but it's not actually showing up. Thanks for subscribing, Piotr Wachowicz. I'm bad. Piotr. I never know how to do like Eastern European and Russian names. I learned how to pronounce some languages like Spanish occasionally because they're around me a lot, but those are not. So. All right. Okay, I was showing you all just the basics of what an action looks like. So the vast majority of actions basically pull things out of this Lambo store, and then they make modifications to files or folders or whatever else based on that. And then they basically they're done, and then you move on to the next one. And if anything happens that makes you want to stop it, like for example, thanks for subscribing, Philippe. Then they'll throw an exception, and if the exception gets thrown, then that stops it. So, thanks for subscribing, Beganovich. Thank you for subscribing, Abhishek. Man, we're killing it here. So cool. So let's figure out what's next. What I was doing last time I was working on this, which wasn't a stream, I apologize, everybody. I didn't stream the majority of the work on this one, was I was working through each of those parameters that we have in the signature and making sure they actually do what they should do. And we're actually pretty close to done. So please stop me at any point. I know that I haven't been streaming the majority of this, so a lot of these things are going to be unfamiliar for people who are, my normal streamer hang-arounders. So especially if you've never done an app like this before, never worked with Laravel Zero, please ask me questions on this one. So what I did here was I basically said, look at our syntax and make sure that I've done the work to make this syntax. Thanks for subscribing, Vitaly. To make sure that this actually does the work so that if I do pass in this flag, it actually is customized. So for example, I said, okay, what's my first parameter? Editor. All right, let's make sure that my open in editor thing respects the option. So right here, when we're getting app console, remember in our new command, we're binding this command to this console thing. And so console really represents this command, and the command then has access to whatever's passed into it. It will be easy to add new actions. Yeah, that's the goal. So for example, if we were to come in here and just say, well, I want I want to know what was passed in as the editor flag, we can just do this real quick. App console option editor. And so I can show you what we're getting there. So if we do this, you're not going to get anything. Oops, what did I do wrong? Lambo, new, and then it should, oh, right, ABC. All right, so null, nothing was passed in as editor, but if we then pass it in -e equals like Sublime, then all of a sudden it's going to get, oh, I think that's supposed to be E space Sublime. Man, am I forgetting the syntax? Okay, there you go, E Sublime. How do you keep such a good posture when coding and streaming? I know I slouch after 10 minutes as well. However, one thing that helps is having a mic in front of your face, and then you slouch, and then you end up going like this. And then if you want to move from PHP Storm to Sublime Text, I have an article about that. If you want to move from PHP Storm to VS Code, I think the majority of work that I did there was based on two people's articles. One was Caleb Porzio, and I'm trying to remember the other person, and they wrote articles about their basic VS Code setup. Going to use $editor at all. Great question, Dustin. I did in the original Lambo. I kind of feel like I might want to use that as the fallback here. So keep that in your brain so that we can get back to it in a second. On the topic of posture, real quick, I did have quite a little bit of an interest for a while there of getting one of those posture correctors that everybody's trying to advertise to you, or at least to me all the time. But what I read from everybody, or heard and read from everybody, is that those don't actually help. What is important is core strength. And so they said, if you want good posture, go to the gym. Don't worry about buying a $50 device. As a default makes sense, so they just do E with no value. So right now, let's see what the default editor is. Oh, so the default editor is no editor. That's what it is. So let's leave a real quick note. Should we default to, and the interesting thing is that this is the environment variable. What would we rather if they don't customize? Not open an editor or open it in the default one? Get small instead. Am I attending Laravel UK this year? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That's a good question. But I would love to get to at least one European conference this year if I could. So. Oh, yeah, and that was a bummer last year. Those crazy prices on those flights just really kind of threw everything for a loop. Okay, so what were we talking about? I was showing you all how this editor works and how I was working through all these. Okay, yeah. So basically, these actions are pulling things out of the parameters that were passed in by getting the instance of the new command and then running methods on it. And so the method here is the option method, which allows us to say what was passed in for editor. And so what I was doing was showing you all how this looks. So there you go. So if I do -e Sublime, or if I do -e, I forget what the PHP Storm one is, whatever. So we have access to that parameter that was passed in. And then so we're pulling it here. And so now I can say, okay, cool. So if I passed in Sublime, then run, or SUBL, then now go run SUBL space period. Which would basically end up running this, which opens the current directory in Sublime, which is exactly what we want. So what I was doing was going through them one after another to ensure that the parameters that I had defined were actually making a difference. Because originally, when I built this, I built all these commands, but none of them honored the parameters. They just built the default one, and now I want to add it so that the parameters actually are honored. So let's look at what our other parameters are. I actually want to look at this one. editor, message, path. I think those are all done. So let's just real quick look at the message. Yep. So when you're initializing your Git repo and then adding everything and then committing with the message gets pulled out of the option. And then if you don't have an option, then it uses initial commit anyway. Okay. What was our next one? Path. Customize the path in which the new project will be created. I think that happens through our... So I have a helper called shell, and shell is what defines how everything runs. And so what we're doing in shell is basically we've got two commands, exec in root and exec in project. And so both of them first go into a directory and then run your command. If anybody's curious, there's a way to run exec, which is basically a process, and actually pass it the directory you want it to run in. However, if you do that, it then expects the things you're running here to exist in that directory. And for things like the Laravel installer, they don't. So for reasons, this whole cd into it and then run it is actually a better context than running this command and passing a directory to it. So what we do is we say this is our process we want to run, and then we run it. And so these root path and project paths, we need to make sure that they're correctly honoring when I pass in a custom path. And the custom path would be something like this, -p, and instead of in my sites directory, I might want to I want to create this one underneath the site/temp directory or something like that. So that's what p allows me to do. And so what we'd want to do, although, yeah, I think that's right, is we'd want to ensure that this root path and project path are getting correctly honored. And I think I did that one too. Like I said, that all lives in this config here. So root path and project path are both being based off of this get base path method. So let's take a look at that. It says, yep, if this option path, then return this. So let's just look at what the output of get base path is real quick to see if it's actually working correctly. All right. Users Matt Stauffer sites temp. So that's that whole thing where it replaces the tilde with that. And then if you were to do something like this, because you were just being created, then you would end up getting that. Obviously, nobody's going to do that, but I'm not trying to compare against that and make sure you don't do that or anything like that. So that's the base path. So that parameter is being honored correctly. So let's look at browser. When I open it in the browser, can I customize the browser? Oh, you could use $home instead of tilde. Yeah, but that would require the person to do... Actually, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this will be... Let's look. Yeah, so but the problem is that we require them to do the $home when they're entering it, which I think most people won't. So rather than requiring them to do $home, what I'd do is I will just take the responsibility on myself of handling tilde. Home is universal enough to use, but home requires the people to type in home, right? And I want the end person to be able to type what is comfortable for them, and that's tilde. And just in case anybody's curious, the way that happens is in the app service provider, I bind your home dir to this, and this is all this POSIX stuff that I really hope is going to work everywhere. I don't think server home gets filled because of it not being a server, but I could be wrong. But this seems to be working for now, so hopefully it'll keep working. Grimace. Okay, so where were we? Browser. Does it honor a customized browser? So the answer is no. Great. So this is the first one where we've gotten to the point where I have not done it yet. So by default, it uses Valet Open because Valet already has some tooling for this. So I'd rather use Valets than rewrite it on my own. But we need to allow you to instead customize it. So the first thing I do when I'm doing one of these is I say, well, how did we do it in the original Lambo? So leave a few to-dos and then work on allowing the browser parameter to customize which browser you're opening the project with. Cool. So let's look at how the browser works. All right. So Darwin, I think, which means Mac versus PC. or Mac versus Linux, but here you go. If the browser is not equal to empty, then open -a browser project URL. So, and then this is the thing where we're running this thing where it could be a Mac or it could be Linux. So this is where we have to be able to test, and I'm a little nervous about that. Like, are we going to be able to figure out Darwin versus not Darwin now that we're in PHP? So this is one of the reasons why I haven't gotten to this one yet. So let's just kind of take a look at this. Oops. All right, so this is the original. So what things do we need to do? We need to say if so first thing we do is just say, if we haven't customized it, just keep it exactly as is, right? Great. And so, by the way, one of the things about this is there's tests. However, I've only been able to do simple tests that have to do with like assert that, you know, if I pass strings into the customize.env thing, then the strings get output differently. What I haven't run tests on are things where we're actually checking whether certain Symfony processes have been spun up or not spun up. And that's something where I'm definitely going to need some help on those ones. So Nunu, if you're still here, I might ask you to kind of chip in and say, oh yeah, that's super easy to do. Here's how to do it or whatever. But basically, so for testing this one, for example, I would want to assert that this string is one thing if we do one thing and a different thing if we do a different thing, right? So like I'd like to be able to test that it correctly tests whether or not we're on Linux machine, but I have to know more about how to test using Symfony processes than I do right now. Okay, so basically if this is Mac, right, and then this is going to be Linux. That's our current assumption. Hopefully we can do it where I can drop the else here and then just have it be whatever happens afterwards. So that's what we're doing here. If Mac, then shift. Okay, we're already done. So this right here. So this is already happening. So let's take a look at this. And Valet Open should work on Linux. So we don't have to use quite the same structure here. We can assume that Valet Open works all the time. Great. So all we have to do is worry about if you did customize it, let's handle Mac versus Linux differently. So we do have the same concept here with the project URL. Interestingly, it looks like we are... it looks like in the Linux one, we're not allowing them to customize the browser, which seems incorrect. Thank you, Frick. PHP OS is a constant you're looking for, which will make so much easier than all this crap we had to do in Shell. All right, so... so let's just try this for now. PHP OS. Darwin. We'll have to check that's actually correct, and then we'll have to figure out what this one is. Do you use Valet Linux? No, I use a Mac, but I recommend Valet Linux, but I don't use it. All right, so what we have here is in a Mac, we're going to run our customized version of this. So let's figure out what we're building. This shell exec in... I guess it doesn't really matter where you exec it because it's just running this. So it's going to be this right here, open-a browser project URL. So let's put that in and then figure out what does it look like for us to actually build that. On Lambo, PHP uname returns from the operation system. Okay, so we've got both PHP OS as a constant and PHP uname. So let's just kind of see what we get there. So one of the things I like to do is when I'm working on these, I don't want to every time I test this manually in my browser or in my console to then have to like go delete the versions of these. And like I said, testing these is not something that I have like, I don't have these all perfectly tested and I don't have the full knowledge of how to, like, for example, how to customize the what this PHP OS constant is getting, right? How do you modify that in testing? So I'm trying to balance between testing these and actually just getting the damn thing done and then going back and testing it as I go afterwards. So it's, you know, it's like I don't like writing code that's not tested, but I also don't like never getting anywhere because I don't know how to test these console things. So I'm kind of like flipping back and forth. So anyway, with this one, what I want to do is I'm going to actually kind of just see what the outputs of these things look like right here before we even get to actually running the Laravel installer, because we're currently working on open in browser, which is like the last thing. And so by the time we run this 5 times, we'll have Laravel Nude 5 times. So what I want to Laravel Nude. So let's just kind of look at PHP OS and then PHP uname, which based on the way that's written, looks like it's probably a function. So let's just try those and just see what do we get out of both of those. Okay, cool. So Darwin, and then we get all that kind of stuff. So right now we're just going to work with Darwin. That's all I want. So we're just going to stick with the PHP OS. It would be nice if any of y'all are on Linux, or if you want to go Google for me, it would be nice if you were to just let me know what I should be expecting on this PHP OS thing, so I don't have to go look it up. GNU Linux, not Linux. On Linux it says Linux. Okay, Bogdanovich, I'm not sure what that means. And Dustin says on Linux says Linux, so I'm just going to do that for now until somebody tells me otherwise. So, sweet, done already. Sweet, thank you. All right, so here, this is what we need to build, and then we basically have the same idea for Linux. Found a gist list. Echo PHPOS is empty. No, it's a constant, not a it's a constant, not a thing. Some possible values for this. Darwin FreeBSD. Okay. Yeah, so I think we're okay to only focus on the Linux people. I don't think we need any of the rest of these. But if any of y'all use these other things, let me know. Thanks, Draman. Yeah, so it looks like Linux is going to be us for now, and if somebody comes along and says, oh, I'm using it, and mine says OpenBSD or something, they can kind of do a pull request. All right, so if we don't customize the browser, we just run Valet Open. Great. If we do customize the browser, if we're on a Mac, we're going to run it this way, and if we're on Linux, we're going to do it this way. And I think it was xdg-open. So the next thing to note here is that we had done it a little differently here. So I would love for any Linux users to let me know, if you're using XDG Open, how do you customize the browser? Because in this one we weren't. Down here you see it just is it's doing XDG Open, or is it not possible? And second of all, is this pipe to dev null necessary? Folks in Linux community prefer to call Linux GNU Linux, not just Linux, because that is just kernel for operating system. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, for the rest of the world, and also for the rest of the world, we all call it Linux. So that's, but I understand that. So for right now, I'm just going to replicate what we had in existing Lambo, which is xdg open space project URL, whatever. Okay. So my presumption was this project URL variable was equivalent to like the full HTTP URL. Right now, I'll do this with these concatenated strings when we might use sprintf afterwards. I'm not sure. Let's just see what feels right. But anytime I have to do slashes in front of my quotes like this to escape them, I start feeling gross. Look at that. Never use string interpolation without braces, says T-Lint. Which I agree with. I agree with everything T-Lint says. Okay, I don't care. It's just Linux for me. Ubuntu 16.18, Debian 8.11 says Linux. Nuno says for Linux, bang, this is Mac, and string to upper PHPOS is not equal to win. So are there a lot of people out there using Linux who are using... Because, Nuno, if I were to do that, then what we would end up doing is basically Sigwin, FreeBSD, HPUX, IRX64, NetBSD, OpenBSD, SunOS, Unix... those would all get treated with this XDG Open. Is that correct? Thanks, Dustin. And if so, then I'll go for what you said, Nuno. I'm just curious whether what you're intending is for all of these except Darwin and the 3 wins to all get captured in there. Not many people running a Laravel installer are going to be an OpenBSD free, and that's what I thought. Like, I'm just trying to figure out, is anybody really going to be using any of these other than Linux or Darwin or Windows? And I don't think so, but I don't know that I don't know, But I definitely don't want this to be like handling some super wonky edge cases where we're going to suggest that we're supporting something that we don't actually have the capacity of supporting. Well, we're definitely not using Windows. So we've got Linux and Darwin. Are individual humans who are likely to use Lambo running OpenBSD on their personal computers? That's the question for me. And are there a significant enough number of them that we need to support it? Okay, I like the nah. So in Lando, we only care about OS. Yeah, we don't care about Windows at all here. So not to say they don't care about them, but there's work that would need to be done on Lambo before we support Windows people. So I'd rather finish this version before we start adding that onto our plate. One thing worth noting is that this is Linux concept. Now that I look at it, isn't necessary unless we're able to use it to pass along the customized browser. Because if we're not, then all we're doing here is what I expect Valet Open is also doing. So if that's the case, let's just let them do it and just do that, right? Why not checking if Mac else is Windows? Yeah, so that's kind of what we're talking through here, Drummond, is that I believe everyone using OpenBSD use modern desktop environment Linux. So actually, yeah, the big question is anybody actually using OpenBSD? That's my better question. But interestingly, it doesn't matter now that we're thinking about this because we're not actually allowing you to customize the browser in Linux anyway. It's only Mac right now that we're actually making that a possibility. Now that we might need to change that, but for right now it's only Mac. So if only Mac people can do it, then we really just have this. So we need to invert this though, because if somebody customizes their browser and they're not on Mac, then we need to still just use Valet Open. So if this is Mac and this browser, allow you to customize it. Otherwise, do this, right? That's really what we're doing. XDG open URL. Yeah, thank you. Given Laravel, Vue, and the Valet are targeting Mac and Lambo depends on them, you're really making your life harder by trying to support these platforms. Well, that's not entirely true. So what I have said from the get-go is that we are going to try to support Linux as well. And the existing Lambo supports Linux and Mac because there's a Valet Linux. So that's you, John Sugar. So the goal is to support Linux and Mac and not anybody else. So this is it. If you're a Mac and you've customized the browser, then allow you to open your customized browser. Otherwise, do this. Okay, let's move on. Let's actually get our browser and our project URL correctly. So I believe we already have the project URL as, lambo.store. So I think I'm going to do this. I may regret this, but let's just see. All right, this printf. And then this one's going to be config lambo.store.browser, I think it was. This is going to be config lambo.store.project URL, I think. And then I realize that this right here is going to be this browser. And then all right, Linux, yes, because Linux port, but none of the others. Yeah, exactly. Totally, John. All right, Dustin. Yeah, so we're just going to keep it with XDG open unless somebody comes along and says, here's a really easy way to customize the browser you're using. Only thing you do is change the default browser and then open for Linux. Yeah, that's totally not ideal. So we're just going to, so we might need to document somewhere. Let's look at our options. How easy is it to document browser here. There you go, Mac only. Except it's not Mac, it's Mac OS. Great. All right, so if we're on a Mac and we've customized the browser, then execs printf open-a %s %s. First %s is the browser, second %s is the project URL. Otherwise, this shell exec and project valet open. And then is Mac is whether your PHP OS constant, thank you again, Frank, is set to Darwin, and browser is config lambo.store.browser. Great. I like it. So I need to test that. So let's first take notes about what we're doing. Allow the browser parameter, customize which parameter. Okay, cool. So let's, so one of the things is because the thing here that we're doing actually modifies the directory structure, I do a lot more frequent commits because I don't want to accidentally run something that like totally wipes out the work that I'm working on. Again, reason why I hope that I can get to testing this better ASAP. So what will we say? We'll say allow browser parameter to customize which browser opens the project. Okay, so then we go to somewhere else. And then we're going to say Lambo, new ABC, editor of, let's look at what the documentation suggests. It should be, oh, that's not editor. Did I say editor over here? No, great, browser. -B space applications. So I don't know if I actually have, do I not have Google? Oh, Google Chrome. All right, so let's try that, like that. That's not my default browser. And let's see if it works. And this is why I do as much as possible without actually testing it, because it takes a long time. I also should have commented out things like npm install, because that takes forever. Off topic, why do you think that the viewers count of live coding is relatively small? Because in the middle of the day, well, part of it is because you're only seeing the count for Twitch, and there's at least as many people on YouTube as there are on Twitch. The other thing is it requires you to take an hour out of the middle of your day. Did I just crack my own neck? I guess it did make a little bit of a crack noise. Yeah. So I think in the middle of the day, there's just not as many people who have an hour of their time during the workday to just kind of like dip out and watch it. So what you'll notice from these is that you'll get, I'll get anywhere between, 40 to 150 people watching live. And then the replay will get a lot more, because the replay allows people to skip through. The replay allows people to fast forward to watch it at 1.5x. The replay allows people to watch it at their convenience. A lot of streamers stream on the weekends because that's when they're free and that's when their viewers are free. The problem is I'm really not free in the weekends. So as much of a bummer as it is, I just figure, hey, whoever has free time in the middle of their day, come hang out with me, and then everyone else watch the replays on YouTube. So yeah. For most of my audience, it is either dinner time or it is in the middle of the workday. So I get it. So it looks like to me, the fact that this is opening in Choosy makes me think that it wasn't passed to Chrome. So we're going to now go back and actually comment a whole bunch of things out, and that's a bummer. So valet unsecure. Composer doesn't load from cache. I think that is it loading from cache, although I'm not 100% sure. But okay, so that didn't work the way we wanted. So here's what we're going to do. We're now going to grab this right here and then just say, like, let's just dynamp that, and then we'll run just that one real quick, just to kind of see what happens. Let's do it again. And we now should see no such file directory. Oh, because it's, I think, open in browser is trying to No, wait, which? I'm kind of confused about what's going on here. Okay, so new command should be running this open in browser and then exiting. So did I do something wrong? There we go, okay. Oh, look, it is not correctly getting the browser parameter. That would explain why it didn't open it the way you want it to. So let's figure out why that happened. Look at that. This browser should be getting lambo.store.browser. So let's look at the lambo.store.browser. Oh, hey, it's not in lambo.store.browser. That's why. It should be app console option browser. Matt. Great. So I don't know if this is going to need escaping. That's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully not, because it's in the middle of quotes. So let's now go back and try it again. Yeah, I think these are all from cache. It just still takes a while. Oh, I forgot to disable npm install. Oh well. Call to protected method exec. Oh, really? Really? It just does. The reason I call exec is because it just doesn't matter where it runs from. But you know what we could do is, because I actually output the thing that we were running earlier, we can just manually run it to make sure that it actually works correctly. We still want to test it on our own, because sometimes just because you can run something on your own doesn't mean it can be run from the Symfony process. But let's just try this real quick and just see, does that work the way I expect? No. So good thing we tested it. So the first thing is, I kind of imagined that it would be http://, but it's interesting to me because I'm pretty sure that was copied directly from open-a browser project URL. So let's see what happens if we put an actual URL in there. Does that work now? Yes, it does. Great. That tells me that this project URL does not have the HTTP or whatever in front of it. And I'm curious whether we should modify this project URL thing, or whether we should build it with the HTTP sometimes and not other times. All right, so down here, we're replacing it here, but interestingly, here and elsewhere, this HTTP thing should be customized based on whether or not we're securing it. Is it anywhere else? Nope, nowhere else is using it. So let's actually just put the, what's it called? HTTP versus HTTPS. What would you call that? It's got a name, and it's just totally escaping me. Somebody will think of the word, because it's a super common word we use all the time, and I just can't think of it right now. Protocol, thank you. Scheme would make sense too, but protocol was the one I was trying to think of. Thank you, everybody. All right, protocol. So get base path, get protocol. So this is going to be based on whether or not they pass in secure. So by default you do this, but we want to be able to customize. See, everyone's not sure whether it's schema, scheme, or a protocol, but a protocol is what made sense in my brain, so I think we're going to go for that. So in some contexts, you want it to be HTTPS. You know what we're going to do for right now? We're just going to say to do if securing, because we're almost out of time, change to HTTPS. Cool. And then we got rid of that one where it was adding the protocol on its own. Great. And so now let's go to ours, which is here. And now this should be generating it correctly. So let's go to cd abc. Let's valet unsecure. But by the way, whoever it was that asked earlier, the off-top frag KP, why do you think the viewer count of live coding is relatively small? I'm curious whether anybody has any ideas. Oh, it seems I'm missing a quote. All right, I'll take a look in a second. I'm curious whether anybody has any ideas about ways that live coding could be more interesting, or whether it just reveals the fact that live gaming is just more interesting than live coding to people. And I've actually put up a couple surveys on my YouTube asking people, hey, do you want me to get back to making short 5-minute explainer videos, or are you preferring live coding? And I keep expecting people to say, oh, you know what? I'd rather you spend 3 hours making an explainer video that's 5 minutes long than spend 1 hour making a 1 hour stream, although it's not really 1 hour because I have to edit it afterwards and stuff. But every time I do those types of votes, everyone, or the vast majority of people, ask for live streams. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll keep doing it. And I would be a little discouraged if I was only getting, a couple hundred people, but the replay on them is much higher. So I'm just like, well, maybe people like the live stream context, but watching it live is just not, or like this whole thing where it's not super prepared. I'm just kind of talking through it as I go, but they don't have the ability to watch it live. So. Yeah, and I mean, trying to balance it so both people in, Europe and people in the West Coast of the US can hit live at the same time is very difficult time-wise. All right, so somebody said I'm missing a quote somewhere. So if you know where it was that I was missing the quote, Abhishek, please let me know. And that was the other, don't forget to move the NPM install this time. Thank you. All right, so I think we're running it again here to see if it opens it up in Chrome. Hey-yo, there we go. It's not found because I'm doing it under the temp directory. Great, and now the last thing I want to do is make sure it works without passing the parameter. There's a mail guy walking outside my office who I might have to go let in just a second. We'll see. Okay, so... that's what we're doing, right? Just Lambo/Lambo new, except last time I passed in a browser, and this time I'm not going to pass in a browser. Yep. All right. Let's make sure that works. Oops. By the way, the fact you can read the chat, answer questions, and not break your concentration enough to code as well boggles my mind. I mean, I'm only doing so well of it. I'd be a lot faster and make a lot less mistakes if that weren't the case. Things to do later. Great. Customize URL if wise. Default to editor if editor not passed. Figure out how to test things that depend on A, constants like PHP OS, and B, testing commands passed to Symfony process. I know we could do that with a lot of mocking, but I'm wondering how convenient and easy that testing can be. All right. Yeah, totally. Hey, Ant. As the user set an editor in first run, I just don't like. I don't ever like the idea of forcing them. Lambo's all about speed, and so anything that requires you to do anything when it runs bums me out, even on the first time. So I think the bigger question for me is if somebody doesn't pass an editor, and if somebody has not created in a config file, in that context, should we A, open editor, the default editor, or B, not open the editor at all? One of the answers for a lot of these has just been, well, what does the existing Lambo do? And let's just do that. So let's actually just look real quick. Hey. There you go. So if they've customized it, we use their custom one. Otherwise, we use editor. Otherwise, we use Vim. So that's what it is. Or Vim if. Great. I think that's it for today. So let's do a git commit real quick. Let's say, what did we just do? We pass protocol along with project URL. And what was the change we made to open in browser? Was it just that? Oh, finish. Okay. When can we expect the next live session? All those to not be able to quit Vim. The next session will be next Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern, which is basically this exact same time, 1 week from now. There will also probably be a session Monday at 2:45 Eastern, I believe, where I do live coding with someone who's still learning Laravel. My current co-host is Zuzana Kunskova, although she and I have to make sure that we both have time this Monday. And we're working on a family tree in Neo4j. But the goal with that is to work on one project with one person for a while and then hit pause and then work on another project with another person for a while. So, but I think that we have more progress we want to make on that family tree one before we call it kind of ready to be done with those streams, although I need to check with her about that. Ooh, thank you. Enable npm install again. See, that's why I need to not be just doing my git diff like that. Re-enable npm install and the -n command. And yeah, I need to figure out how to solve this -n command being a conflict. Right there. So let's put that on our to-do list for next time as well. Solve the conflicted -n thingy. Key. Great. Thanks. Zigdy one. Is GAC? Oh no, GAC is custom. I always try to remember to not use it. I apologize. GAC is git add period and git commit -m whatever I type, because I just do this so frequently that I just made a shortcut. I've got a couple other shortcuts you'll see me use. GPR is git pull rebase, and then GCO is git checkout. Git GCB is git checkout -b, and then GCup is this whole complicated thing that basically finds any local branches that aren't needed anymore and deletes them. I try to remember to not use them on streams, but I did not remember today. You're always doing such a good job at my name. Thanks so much. I'm glad I do my best. Okay, type GAC. Would it really? Oh my gosh. That is so cool. You just taught me something awesome. Look at that. That's awesome. I'm so happy I just learned that. Very, very, very cool. Bash magic.